It's almost time, kids. The clock is ticking. Be in front of your TV sets for the horathon. And remember...
By definition alone, there are fewer films. Films. Sequels suck. Sequels suck. Sequels suck. Films.
Welcome back, movie fans. This is Sequels Suck, the podcast that talks all things sequels, remakes, reboots, and sequels that decide to have nothing to do with the original. Hello, Sequel Suck gang. Welcome back, and welcome back to Shaun. Thanks for coming back for another episode in the Halloween franchise. How's everyone going? Are we good?
Good. I think Shaun's a sucker for punishment, isn't he?
Or someone who has genuinely good taste. This is about the absolute limit of this mask, by the way. This is just
Oh, serious.
that's agony.
I mean, to be fair, you lasted longer than I thought you were going to last, if I'm being honest.
Really, like, it's not that uncomfortable. When he starts talking, it just echoes in your head in a very strange way.
And you were a little bit muffled.
Yeah, well, I mean, my mouth was not a real mouth on the exterior. I don't want to give it away. I know there was teeth, but it wasn't a real one. This week we are talking Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, which is one of the oddest entries of a sequel into any franchise that I can think of. Maybe there's more that I'm just not remembering, but oh boy, in the canon of films, especially Halloween films, this one really jumps out as being something quite strange. Is this? I'm going to go to Michelle last. Is this something we've all been familiar with for a while? When did you first watch it, Shaun? You're a Halloween fan. When did you check out Halloween 3 first?
It's probably much along the lines of part 2, to be honest. Just start trawling through all the sequels like part 2, and I came across it. But I remember, as I'm sure we're going to end up getting to eventually, I remember when again, to reiterate what we said last year, when we were teenagers, there was no internet, there was no Facebook groups, there was no anything like that. You wanted to know something about a film, you either had to see the film, you had to know somebody who's already seen the film, or you just had to, like, try and find a library book. Like you had to go to a library and find and like go through and find a book and then read the book to see what was that. And even then, it was just whatever they wanted. Like it was just like this little paragraph. And so there was when I grew up, there was never anything about Halloween 3. So all I had to do was just watch it. And again, it'd probably just come through with the rest of those slashes that came on the back of Scream. I will say I was fucking crushingly disappointed.
The first time that you saw it?
Oh, devastated. Like sick in my own mouth, kind of devastated.
Did you have any idea when you went in for the first time that this was going to be a Michael Myers free Halloween?
No.
Wow. So you saw it as the majority of audiences did when the film first came out, because that famously is the biggest argument against this film, is that they didn't really let people know this wasn't going to be a Michael Myers Halloween movie, and people kind of ucked up.
And I copped it sweet, unfortunately.
Wow. What about you, Cable? When did you check it out?
It would have been a long time after I'd probably seen all the others, because I was kind of, I guess, worded up at Season of the Witch, which we should have really gone to Michelle being the resident witch on the podcast first. But, being Season of the Witch, again, it's one of those pop culture things that, similar to what Shaun said, it was kind of like this weird film where it was called Season of the Witch Halloween 3, but they didn't really tell you Michael Myers wasn't in it. But I think by the time I got around to watching the movies, I was well aware that he wasn't in it or wasn't part of the canon, and I was heard it was just shit out. So it was kind of one that for a long time I just didn't bother watching. It was skipped over. Again, touching on what Shaun said, not having Facebook and all that, it was just word of mouth through your neighbor or another friend that had seen it at school or something like that. So, don't worry about Wood 3. So it was one of those ones for a long time. It was just like, don't need to watch it.
Yeah, I had my local video store guy tell me not to. I was going through the Halloween movies and I walked up to the counter with 2, 3, 4. And he's like, honestly, this one isn't a part of it. I was like, what? He's like, Halloween 3 isn't a part of the Halloween series. Just put it back. You don't need it. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, it's got nothing to do with the others. I was like, oh, all right, I'm not going to. And I didn't watch it until probably about, I would say 8 years ago. I was like, well, I don't need to watch it. It's got nothing to do with it.
When you were 40, that's when you watched it.
Yes, when I was 40, 8 years ago, when I was 40 was when I first watched Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. And I remember it was one of the last ever DVDs that I rented from a brick and mortar video store. There was one across the road from my house, and I was walking past it one day. I was like, I'll poke my head in, and they were renting out stuff cheap. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to check it out. And I took it home, and that was the very first time I watched it. And then I took it back, and then I never rented from a video store again because they were gone. Michelle, our resident witch, we got around to Halloween 3 Season of the Witch.
We did last
When was the
week.
first time you saw it? Last week?
Last week.
Uh,
After the podcast about Halloween 2.
So going straight from old mate Michael Myers being exploded along with Dr. Loomis and Jamie Lee, Laurie Strode being driven off to safety, did you have any idea what you were getting into with Halloween 3?
I knew Michael Myers wasn't in it because I think I've read about it that it was like they were trying to branch out to just like Halloween type themed movies. But I really liked it. So I don't know what you guys are all talking about.
Well, that I feel like we're almost going to be divided right across the line because I also really like Halloween 3. I think it is an incredibly interesting and strange film. I think it's a great relic of 80s horror. Precious few actual witches in season.
Yes, that was my one complaint. Where are all the witches?
In fact, I found out this week that Tommy Lee Wallace got the title Halloween 3 Season of the Witch from his mate. Oh my God, it's going to George Romero. George Romero has a movie called Season of the Witch. And he was like, oh, it'll be a homage to George Romero. And that's why it's called Season of the Witch. Not because it ever had witches in it at any point, but because he was like, oh yeah, that's good. It's totally different from Halloween. So Michelle likes it. I like it. Cable and Shaun, do you guys, now that time has passed and you've been able to get over the shock of Michael Myers, do you actually like this film or do you still feel bitterly disappointed and sick to your stomach about it?
No, well, for me personally, no, because I'm aware it's not a Michael Myers film. And you know what? You could almost say it's kind of ahead of its time in that a lot of TV shows do this now, like American Horror Story and all these. They have these anthology episodes or series. And movies, I feel like, are going down that path now that at least they're upfront and transparent with fans. They're like, oh, we're going to do this spin-off movie, which is almost like a spin-off movie, though. You know, there's the little cameo of the TV showing Halloween. So it's kind of in the in-universe, but has nothing to do, obviously, with Halloween at all. Obviously the Michael Myers Halloween version. But yeah, I think it's kind of ahead of its time in that regard. And overall, the themes in the movie and some of the ideas are really good.
What do you think, Shaun, now that you've gotten past that first shock?
Well, this is actually the first time that I've watched it since my first watching. Like it's been like a 20-year gap.
That's
because I was that crushed about it.
Wow.
Well, now I'm even more impressed that you agreed to come onto this episode.
But to be honest, I actually quite liked it.
Good.
I actually thought it's much better than I remembered. I mean, there's a lot to like about it, but it's if you divorce it from the canon, that's the best start that you've got.
Yes,
is what in my humble estimation. If you can just watch it as a standalone by itself film, then yeah, I completely agree with you, Angus. Like it's a kind of kooky, interesting relic of 80s horror, and it does all those things that 80s horror does quite well, and it does wear its influences on its sleeve. Not least of all, Tommy Lee Wallace being one of John Carpenter's proteges. But there's a lot more to like, and it's kind of made me a little bit resentful at myself because I wish I could have been watching this a lot more over the years rather than just neglecting it out of some petulant attitude.
Yeah, and
Attitude.
That's mature of me though, isn't
Petulant
it?
it's very mature, very adult. And I feel like
adult.
we're going through a moment in history where I feel like a lot of people might be having the same attitude as you because it is getting like a bit of a cultural reappraisal, and the stink of Halloween 3, that weird one that doesn't have anything to do with Michael, has washed off a bit. I also think it's a really fascinating film to look at as a sort of a relic of film history because it's not Halloween 3's fault that it's the only Halloween movie without Michael Myers. At the time they made it, like we touched on before, that was the plan. That was John Carpenter's plan. There was never going to be a Halloween 2 with Michael Myers. It was going to be an anthology, but the producers were like, no, we need Michael Myers. And he agreed and he did it, and he didn't really enjoy the experience like we talked about last episode. And then they were like, all right, we're doing number 3. And everyone kind of was like, okay, he's properly dead this time. So let's do this really cool anthology thing. And every year we can do a Halloween movie that has a totally different story, totally different killer. And the idea was that it would be almost like a universe within a universe within a universe. So each movie would kind of have something referencing the previous movie, but not in universe, which is why in Halloween 3 we see them watching Halloween on TV to really sell the point, like it's not even the same unit. Like in this universe, Halloween is a movie like it is for you guys, and then the next film someone might pick up a book that said Season of the Witch, or someone might wear a t-shirt with a poster on it, and it would keep being referenced that all these movies were movies watched by characters. And and on and on and on. And if that had have happened, I think season 3 of The Witch would never have been sort of shit on. I think it'd honestly probably wind up being one of the stronger entries in the canon, because if you're going to do an anthology, we know that a couple in it's probably going to trip and stumble, especially in the 80s when they're like just boobs and blood. And this one has some really great ideas, and it also has not just Tommy Lee Wallace, who, like I said, was a protege John Carpenter, who also he is the shape in one or two scenes in the original Halloween. He stepped in and did a couple of shots
Yeah.
where it's actually him. So he has played Michael Myers in the original, and he was in the band the Coupe de Villes with John Carpenter as well. So he's really in this world. But we also have Dean Cundy is back again as the cinematographer. John Carpenter did a pass uncredited on the script of the film and is there as a producer. So you've really got some of the core team back to do it. And most notably, John Carpenter and Alan Holworth do the score. So the music feels like a Halloween movie. The cinematography feels like a Halloween movie. The writing feels like a Halloween movie. The direction feels John Carpenter-esque. It's just that prickly little bit where there's no Michael Myers.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is the two things that struck me most while I was watching it this time was one is that Tommy Lee Wallace has obviously paid attention to John Carpenter. There's a lot of that kind of John Carpenter wide-angle lenses, that Panavision, those Panavision lens flares and floating cameras and all that kind of stuff. It's a much better directed episode than Halloween 2 was. Halloween 3 it's actually directed, right?
Yes.
That's the first thing is that it's probably there's more being pushed into the production than if any threequel probably has any right to have. Like you say, the themes are pretty strong. They're not amazing. They're definitely there. They could probably have been dealt with a bit better. But everything else is just so good. That was the first thing that I thought is that Tommy Lee Wallace is paying attention. The second thing is Tommy Lee Wallace was actually offered the chance to direct Halloween 2, given how much time he had spent on Halloween, and that he was one of John Carpenter's proteges. But he felt Halloween 2 just completely derailed, lost everything that made Halloween 1 so special, and as a result he kind of balked and says no, I don't want it, because he had this idea with Carpenter that it was going to be these anthology films. So based on that, the second thing I was thinking was, what would the Halloween franchise be like if Halloween 2 never existed? Like if we just went from Mike Myers to Season of the Witch, like from Halloween he shoots him, falls off and then it becomes Season of the Witch. What then becomes of the franchise? Like in hindsight, with the added benefit of time as a framework, Halloween 2, albeit it's not very good, is actually a much, 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 much more important film in the canon than I actually ever gave it any estimation to be.
Yeah, because it really did make Halloween 3 feel strange. Like you said, if Halloween 3 is Halloween 2, there's nothing strange about it. There's nothing weird, because they probably would have at least done one, possibly even two more afterwards before they considered going back to the Michael Myers well. And maybe Halloween 5 or Halloween 6 becomes the return of Michael Myers, and we bring that character back then, because they're like, all right, we've done like witches and we've done zombies and we've done evil mermaids, and fuck, we're really out of ideas. Let's get Michael Myers back for one and give ourselves some breathing room before we go back into that world. But yeah, you put it one film later and suddenly so many people, ourselves included, kind of dodge it or shit on it for 20 years before we're like, wait a minute.
It's odd, isn't it?
It's so odd because you don't have the emotional attachment that we do to the Halloween films. Like, did you instantly like it? Did you start watching like, this is great? Or did it take you some time after the credits roll? Because in the group chat, when it finished, you immediately put in, what the hell did I just watch? So did you watch them and like, what the hell did I just watch? That's great. Or did you go, what the hell did I just watch? And then sleep on it and wake up and go, actually,
I think it was like a bit of both. Like, what the hell did I just watch? Like masks, basically like eating people, and also where are all the witches? But also I'd like to see this evil mermaid movie you've just come up with.
but yeah,
I know. I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
Keep that one to yourself, Angus. That's your first $1 million idea.
Haven't they? Didn't they do that in
ideas.
wasn't that kind of in Pirates of the Caribbean 4 or something? The almost
That
like
would
the
be
vampire.
sirens, probably, not mermaids.
Well, they were no, I think I'm pretty sure they were mermaids, and they were.
There
kind
is
of,
actually there's an evil mermaid movie, a horror movie about killer mermaids that is also a musical that came out a few years ago. I can't remember the name of it. But
and didn't Cabin in the Woods do something similar?
Cabin in the Woods had a great mermaid, a great gag about how they want to see a mermaid, and the
Yes.
other guy's like, you don't want to see a mermaid, and when you finally see it, it's a horrible monster that killed him.
Well, Stan Winston, here's a little fun fact for you, a little piece of trivia. Back in about 2000 to 2003, Stan Winston had a production company, and he set off and created an anthology of films. Each one was a B movie, not a B grade movie. They were made for cable, but they were B movies, monster creature features that had some fairly recognizable stars at the time. And then he would churn out, one of them was called Earth versus the Spider, which had Dan Aykroyd as a
I
military
remember that
general.
one.
One was called, what was the other one called? Anyway, but I think there's 4 films produced, and one of them was called She Creature, and it was set at the turn of the century on a pirate's galleon. It starred Carla Gugino, and it was about these sailors who caught a mermaid, and they were trying to transport her back to mainland through a storm, and it all goes sideways. And it was, credit where it's due, not bad. It was pretty good. It's probably worth watching.
Oh, well, you don't have an original idea anymore then. Damn.
Rufus
There's nothing.
Sewell. Rufus
Rufus
Sewell plays
Sewell,
the
that's it.
lead, and do you know what his character's name is? Angus.
Rufus.
So it all comes
Good.
back around anyway. I was there even when I didn't know I was there. Something that I think escaped me the first probably 3 times I watched this movie is what the fuck is actually happening. I never fully appreciated. I don't really know what happens in this movie. Does anyone know what is going on with the masks?
Yeah,
and with
why?
Stonehenge and the
What-
head melting?
No.
So this,
Yeah,
does
well,
anyone know?
no, see, this is
Because I
this
found
is not-
out, but I didn't know from watching.
Oh, okay. Well, I haven't read up on it, but being a bit of a fan of the old stuff around Stonehenge and all that, the mythology with that, there's always been that talk that it was there for rituals and or potential witches or druids or whoever was back when Stonehenge was supposedly erected, and that sacrifices may have been done there and stuff like that. So for me, I like that concept that they used for this movie, and it makes total sense that it's what was it, Silver Shamrock?
Silver
is the
Shamrock,
company,
yes.
and they're and so there's definitely some really good concepts. Whether they executed them perfectly is another thing. And I'm with Michelle. Like I kind of still feel like there needed to be a bit more of a witch-looking creature or some person that needed to be defined a little bit. Doesn't necessarily have to ride a broomstick, but has to maybe a bit more of an embodiment of what we expect from a witch. Instead of a guy potentially just being in a suit and shaving parts of Stonehenge off. But yes.
Is that based purely on the title, that expectation?
Well, so I was going to say this
Witches?
before. I think we're, in hindsight, when we were talking about where it sort of sits in the canon, the movie probably should have been called Season the Witch, with Halloween in a smaller little thing like Halloween 3 or something. But then, having said that, is Season of the Witch a really bad title for it as well, or subtitle? I think that's the thing that's probably another thing that's misleading. You firstly take away Michael Myers and have an anthology film, that's great, but then you call it Season of the Witch. And I just think the expectation is you've got this supernatural stuff happening, but at the reveal at the end, you'd think that guy and or someone he's working with is a witch or something along a bit more. That it's just like, oh, you kind of referencing Stonehenge, but if you don't know, if you're not interested in all those ancient sort of buildings and structures and some of the theories behind that, you've got no basis of the general public understanding that idea. I understood it because I know that stuff, but that's not everybody, is it?
No.
So I think that's where there's this disconnect. Like they've probably gone, this is a great idea, but then this is not maybe a well-known concept to everyone that's going to go see this movie. So it's kind of like, well, that just falls on its ass a bit, you know?
Well,
Yeah.
I did get told that boys can be witches too. That got
Well,
yelled
that's,
at
I
in the
think
group
the
chat.
implication is meant to be that he's a
Yeah.
warlock and he comes
Yeah.
from a coven or a lineage of warlock. He talks about the old country. He talks about how, you know, the sacrifices used to happen and he was going to bring it back again. So I think the implication they want us to get is that Conal Cochran is a warlock and that's how he can draw this power of Stonehenge. When I was reading up about what actually does happen in this movie and why these people's heads get melted, so the concept is that Stonehenge is so powerful a magical totem that if you take even a small fraction of it and then you combine it with a certain frequency, which is the Silver Shamrock song, the dun 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 and the flashing, that if it's close to your head, the energy and the magic is so powerful, it will just melt your fucking brain and that it will draw on hideous, horrible things to flow forth from you, which is why people's heads melt and then bugs and snakes come out, because it's kind of opening a gateway to a dark, evil place, potentially hell, and that's why the snakes come out and they kill people from there. That's not ever clear. In fact, my favorite moment in the movie is when Conal Cochran is taking Dr. Chalice through and he shows him Stonehenge and he's like, Stonehenge, amazing, isn't it? Oh, we had a devil of a time getting it here. You wouldn't believe us if we told you. And then just keeps walking. Fucking bravo. What a great way to get around explaining anything in this movie. It's like, hey, you wouldn't believe me. I'm not going to tell you. It's like, okay, good.
It did still feel very much like Bond villain telling Bond how he did everything.
He really does go full Bond, especially like, he's like, he goes out of his way to kill everyone who gets too close. But then for some reason, this doctor is like, you who are definitely the most threatening of all the people who've come in. You're a big, tall, strong guy. You're a doctor, so you're smart. And I was worried about that fat salesman, so I offed him and his family. But you, I think I can trust. He's everything. This movie feels like a world. Am I alone in that? Like Halloween 2 always felt like you weren't quite sure what the fuck was going on, even though it jumps in straight off the back. But from the moment like Grimbridge, Mr. Grimbridge, which great name, is running away from the henchman and they catch him, and he's in the car out of the petrol station. There's like the light shining through the back of the car to give you that eerie glow. And then he's running through town being scared, like they're going to kill us. Instantly, I'm like, oh, I know where I am. I feel like I'm in a specific place and time. I feel like I'm in a proper 80s horror movie. And not spoilers, but I don't know if any of the ongoing Halloween films in that particular timeline do that again. And I certainly don't think that Halloween 2 did. I think Halloween, like, that film opens and you're like, I know where I am. I know what's going on. This is like very clear storytelling. And then Halloween 2 is a bit like, hang on. And then Halloween 3 is like, oh, great. And then, there's a bit of a gap until H2O, until you get any sense of bearing. Something that is strange, though, is they do the exact same thing in this movie they do in Halloween 2, whereas they go to a hospital and there's only one fucking doctor and one fucking nurse, and that's it. Where are all the doctors and the nurses in the Halloween movies? Like, that just jumped out as being so strange to me.
It looks like it looks like the set of the Avengers, doesn't it? Not the Avengers, the Marvel one, like the old
TV show, yes.
Where they walk through the streets of London, it'd be just absolutely deserted. It's kind of like, this is as far as the budget will stretch. But it does also lend a kind of it could be budgetary reasons, but it also could be by design. I doubt it, but it could be by design. Like every so often there's something that you see things in cinema and you're like, it doesn't quite feel right. And I don't know what it is. Like, I remember the first time that I saw it was in Ridley Scott's fantasy film Legend. You seen that?
Yeah, with Tom Cruise. Right?
Yep. There's
Michelle.
a sequence.
I was going to say, Michelle, I ain't seen it.
Michelle hasn't seen it, but you would love it, Michelle. It's like a proper fantasy film, right? Proper fantasy film. And there's a sequence where Tom Cruise, very young Tom Cruise, he gets jumped on by a witch. There's like this witch that lives in the swamp. Mucklebones Meg, her name is, and she comes out and she's this big grotesque creature thing. And she's got these long fingers, and it's only in hindsight you realize that her fingers actually have about 5 knuckles down each finger, which just makes them look kind of humanish, but this kind of weird, uncanny human. And I get that feeling with this as well. This film feels that way. Everything feels like real life, but at the same time, it's kind of not. And again, I mentioned it to you guys during the group chat, is that it put me in mind an awful lot of Village of the Damned in that regard.
Yeah.
Like, you feel like you've got a really specific place and a really specific time and a really specific threat, but it is just enclosed in this little Stephen King world bubble thing and I don't know if that was by design again or not, but I think it certainly adds to a sense of alienation for sure.
I was saying it also works because it turns out that most of what we're seeing isn't real. It's mostly robots. So it's a pretty good thing.
But even those guys as robots, like even the way they appear in that, it actually gave me a bit of the Invasion of the Body Snatchers feel to it as well. Those guys turning up, and I'm like, ooh, this feels very similar as well.
Well, do you know where Invasion of the
Yeah.
Body Snatchers is set? In a town called Santa Mira. So they
Really?
deliberately set Halloween 3 in the
Ah.
same town as Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And when Tommy Lee Wallace was
Wow.
asked what this movie was, he said it's a pod people movie. It's not a slasher, it's a pod people movie. And he really leaned on Invasion of the Body Snatchers a lot. So you are bang on.
Yeah, he
Absolutely
did say
bang
that.
on.
He said it's a pod people movie, but with modern day witches, witches and technology is what he said.
Ah, yeah.
Which, like, that's a pretty cool concept. Like modern day
Mm.
witches who are like, I'm going to build robots instead of having a
Yeah.
cauldron.
I'm gonna use the fucking internet.
Mm.
Does that offend
Yeah.
your witch sensibility, Michelle? That they would be out there with
Like a little bit.
robots and wearing nice suits and building toys instead of being in the woods.
There are
cackling?
the hocus pocus vibes.
Mm.
This is just the Hocus
Gagging
Pocus
for hocus
2.0.
pocus.
This is what happens when it moves on. I love the black mechanic in this movie who brings in Grimbridge at the start. And like
Yeah.
he's like, I just brought him in. I
Yeah,
didn't do
nothing
nothing.
to do-
Okay,
Yeah.
It's not gonna be any trouble, is there? It's like, yeah,
I
the
can-
one
I
and
can go
only
now.
black guy in this movie is just like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna. It's okay. I didn't do it unless I help people. Unless it's gonna be trouble. Is there trouble? I didn't do nothing. I swear to God.
Well, I
It's
kind of
like-
thought at the end that he might have had something to do with it because I was like, why is he back there and he looks a bit sus? But I guess he was
That's-
innocent in it all.
Just profile.
You just got a suspicious mind. I know. A suspicious mind. Jesus.
Am I wrong in thinking that Dr. Chalice has fucked every woman in this movie?
No, I sent
No.
you that. He's
You're
literally
right.
having sex with that girl, and then he's like, "How old are you?" Like he was so creepy. I wanted him to die, and you were like, "You can't kill him off."
But also, like every nurse, like he's just walking down, he
Yeah.
pinches the nurse's ass, and she's
Yes,
like, "Don't
he's a
start nothing, you can't finish." He's
Sexual
like, "All right."
harasser.
Yeah,
That's why.
and then he's talking to the mortician, and
Yeah.
they've definitely fucked.
That's why the hospital's empty because he's like sexually harassed everyone, and they've all moved out.
All just left. There's all these cases pending in the hospital. So just stay
get
home
out.
on
Yeah.
full pay. That's why he's the only one who gets called into work.
Mm.
Like,
Tom Adkins is actually on the special features to the Blu-ray. He's interviewed and he makes full admissions that he's like yeah. He says like just about every single woman in this film. He says my character has a go at.
Mhm.
He's
Yes,
perfectly
and
aware of it. Like it was obviously an active thing.
apparently, him
Was
and
his wife on this film?
his real life
Yeah.
wife.
Yeah.
so Tom
Wasn't she
Atkins'
Marge?
real life wife
was,
is
yeah.
Is it Midge? Is that her name? The
Marge.
Marge.
Yeah.
So in the scene where Dr. Chalice is banging Grimbridge, who he's not sure how old she is, and in the hotel room next door is Marge getting her face eaten off by these. Like that was Tom Atkins's wife at the time, his real life wife at the time. Who
Yeah, you
was
spoiled that bit for me before I was
going
up to
through.
it.
Well, you messaged and you were talking about it. And I was like, oh, you're up to that bit. This is a fun fact.
They
But
made
also,
out
I
before
didn't-
that as well.
Is it ever explicitly said in the movie that Dr. Chalice and his current in the movie wife are divorced? Because apparently they are.
You just kind of get the
They are.
vibes.
But he
You get
like
the vibe.
he finishes work and he goes home and she's
Mhm.
there. And he's like, "Sorry, I'm late." She's like, "I'm used to it." And he's giving the kids mask. And there's no direct reference that they're not married at that point. You
Not
start
a-
to figure out they might not be because he just
Mm,
keeps fucking.
I
people.
mean, they're either divorced or they're married and they fucking hate each other.
Yeah.
Which,
Like they don't like each other. But that's it. That's Tommy Lee Wallace's actual wife.
oh yeah, who was that? Was she who Loomis who played Annie in the original one?
Correct.
Nancy,
Yeah,
Nancy
that's
Loomis, is that her name?
Nancy-
Who became
Nancy
Nancy
Loomis,
Keys
yeah.
for some reason in this
Yeah.
movie. But yeah, so she was
For
Annie in
whatever
the
reason.
original film. The
Correct.
voice announcer when they say that curfew is on in Santa Mira when they're at San Michelle, and like it's 6 p.m. time to. That's Jamie Lee Curtis doing the voice over there.
It is as well, yeah. Because
and
she wasn't that long after doing The Fog as well, which played the radio announcer for John Carpenter.
yes, and Dick Warlock plays one of the robots. So there's a lot of
Yep.
like everyone involved in the first two, with the exception of the director of number two, obviously had a lot of love coming into this one and be like, yeah, we'll be a part of it in some tangential way.
Even the voiceover of the actual Silver Shamrock advert, that's the voice that's on is like, oh, come into your TV sets, kids, like put on your mask. That's Tommy Lee Wallace as well.
Yeah,
They just
he's on
ramped
the
up
song.
his.
Oh, how
Yeah.
annoying was that song every
Oh no, it
5
was so
minutes?
good, and
It's in
I'm
your head
like,
for days.
Yeah,
so
it's great.
believable that kids would get sucked into
Genius.
that.
Yeah.
What do you-
Genius.
Talking about the music of this
Mm.
one, what do you think of the score? What do you think of John Carpenter's score compared to the first two? because it's a very different beast, but it's kind of like, I think it's pretty banging. How did you guys find the score this time around?
Did they still play the Halloween score at some point, or was I imagining that?
Only when they watch Halloween on the
Oh, yeah.
TV. The rest of the time, it's the other ones that
Don't
all the
start.
really like dark, ominous synth, like bow, bow, like it
Oh
really.
yeah.
It feels like this was when John Carpenter, because John Carpenter obviously scores for I don't know if you know, Michelle, but John Carpenter's famous for scoring all of his own films as well. Like, he's a shit hot musician. But this feels like the film where John Carpenter, and apparently he just got together with the other co-composer, just a bunch of electronic tools, didn't know what they were doing or how. He's just like, if it makes that sound, I like it, I'm going to take it. And then he created and this was where John Carpenter's sound really kind of exploded a little bit, I feel. Like, this is where he kind of found his feet in that electronic synth, like properly dug his feet in. Like, he'd always been playing around with it, but this is where he properly dug his feet in.
Yeah, it's bitching. I listened to the scores a lot, and I got the Halloween 3. And Tommy Lee Wallace in the liner notes for Halloween 3 says, the first thing he says in the liner notes is, yeah, I never should have called it Halloween 3. So Tommy Lee Wallace knows that he shouldn't have done that. But he also says that in his humble opinion, the score for Halloween 3 is John Carpenter's best score and vastly superior to the original one. Which at first I was like, what the? And then I listened to him, and outside of the very important and very catchy Michael Myers theme from Halloween,
How does it go, Ken Angus?
How does it go?
Yeah, I can't remember.
Outside of that, I think he might be onto something. I think John Carpenter really, perhaps unburdened by having to really be hands-on with making the film, focus on the music and just the score. Like, if you listen to the score isolated from the movie, I think it might be better than the original film score. Like, it's really, really friggin' good. He does go in all sorts of directions. He stretches himself. He really tries stuff out. And there is no one moment in the Halloween 3 score that is definitively more recognizable than the original Michael Myers theme. But in terms of like Laurie's theme or returning to the Myers house and all the other little dun 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 dun, all those familiar ones from the original, I think Halloween 3 might knock it out of the park a bit.
How does it fare in the rest of Carpenter's canon though? Because Carpenter's got some pretty good. His score for Assault on Precinct 13 is pretty epic.
That's amazing.
Like, Escape from New York is pretty epic.
Yeah, I think his Fog might be his best score, in my opinion. I don't think Halloween 3 is his very best score, but I think, like, if you put on the Fog, you're like, oh, I'm in a ghost story right now in my own house.
Yeah.
It's really incredible and very, very atmospheric. You're right. Assault on Precinct 13 is great. Big Trouble in Little China is super fun, but
bananas.
I don't know. This one is like pretty damn good. It's pretty sweet, and I think much like the film, it gets overlooked a lot. How do you feel about, we talked about it briefly, but I'm curious how you guys think. How do you feel about the fact that this film is definitively not in the same universe as every other Halloween film? Like, that Halloween movie is a fucking movie in the Season of the Witch world. How does that strike you when you watch this movie?
Don't even care.
Don't even care. All right.
Well, I'm only up to number 4, so I'm not the big Halloween fan like you guys. So don't even care.
Because what it does is it says without a shadow of a doubt, like, this movie can't be included in anything that comes. It's like, now we've gone back to Michael Myers.
It's still it's funny because I mean, I do enjoy that it's a completely different setting, different town they go to. Obviously, different stuff's happening, and it's not reliant on Michael Myers or Dr. Loomis or anything like that. But the funny thing is, they still use at the start a bloody jack-o'-lantern as the sort of logo at the start in the credits, in the form of a sort of computer/TV image. And I kind of think that's kind of funny. Like, they're leaning into the Halloween thing, but I feel like that's now sort of really synonymous with Michael Myers. So it's kind of like, maybe you didn't need to do that. I mean, they're obviously using the name Halloween, and they thought they were going to go in a different direction. But yeah, I guess in hindsight, that's kind of misleading as well. It's like, well, you don't need to have the jack-o'-lantern there.
Yeah, and
all those things.
Is it the last time they did that until the reboot? They start Halloween 4 doesn't start with it.
No.
I
can't remember, and I don't think Halloween 5 does either.
And neither does like H2O doesn't do it. I think Halloween 2 has H2O has a different vibe opening.
Yeah, Halloween H2O is just credits over.
Yeah, so
Haddonfield,
it's not until Halloween 2018 that they get back to putting a pumpkin aside again.
Mm.
So I don't know if that's because after Season of the Witch they were like, oh, burn all the bridges. We can't do any of that stuff again. But yeah,
it feels a little sort of exploitative. Like it feels like the studio just knows that you're gonna suck this up purely based on the name. So we're gonna do everything we can to just make you consume it. But it's kind of like getting a $70 steak put down in front of you. It's just like no, you can smell it, but you can't touch it. Like it's that's kind of what it feels like. It feels a little exploitative. It's just like you kind of rubbing it in my face a little bit.
And that's why when you watched it all those years ago, like you have a right to feel disappointed or ripped off because they're using, I guess, now they've created a franchise and you're watching the third movie and they're using the name and then the title sequence and then you get into it. It's a completely different story. It doesn't matter whether it was good or not. It's like you're not giving what you're expecting. And that's what sequels were back then too. Like who had a sequel that, like Angus said right at the top of the podcast, like who has a sequel that's completely different than the original? Like they bring a couple of characters back or there's a continuation of the story. No, this is completely different. We're just using the same title. We're using the IP and we're going to suck people in that way.
Yeah, and it's not the only slasher to do away with the main sort of villain in that regard for a film. Like Friday the 13th did it in Friday the 13th Part 5. Like there is the implication that Jason's there, but Jason is actually dead in Friday the 13th Part 5.
Yeah.
And there's no Jason Voorhees in Friday the 13th Part 5. And in some of the Saw films, there's no Jigsaw. It turns out it's someone else and things. So it's not totally on its own island in the slasher world where it's like
those examples but those examples you just used, it was still part of that universe.
Well,
and
that's
it's either
it,
someone's nightmare or someone else's the offsider that's helping out or whatever. It's still part of that universe, whereas this is completely different.
The closest one I could actually think of to being similar in any way is Fast and the Furious 3 Tokyo Drift. Because when you look at it now in the canon of films, like Vin Diesel's like, I'm done with this, and like, all right, we're just going to go make it in Tokyo. And then every other film since has been Vin Diesel and his crew, and that one is kind of the bastard child now they've had to figure out how to deal with. But even that,
Vin Diesel does show up at the end. Yeah,
he shows up at the end, and one of the other characters I think they went up putting in that series, they actually went up retconning the timeline to make Part 3 take place after Part 7 or something because they really liked one of the. Anyway, the point is like it's very hard to find something that does anything like it, even though the mechanics of it have happened in various ways throughout horror films and other movies where they're like totally different, and then they've had to come back because it didn't quite make the bank.
I was just going to ask, Michelle, seeing you're the Halloween person of the group, and when I say Halloween, not the franchise movie, you're the holiday, you love Halloween, and I know you've got all the decorations, all that sort of stuff. But one of the things I like about this movie, and I'm wondering what you think, is the actual silver shamrock masks that come out is the witch, the jack-o'-lantern, and the skull. How good are they? Or not really? Well, I guess do you like the look of the mask, the choice of the three masks? The idea of it.
Oh, I like them until they start eating people and there was like snakes and bugs and crap all coming out of them. That's when I was like, what am I watching?
That's something that we didn't talk about yet, which is one of the best and most surprising things about this movie is the kills. Like the kills in this movie are unexpected and messed up. starting with like Grimbridge at the start, where the robot like essentially puts his hands into his face to try and pull I was reading the reason they did that is because the robots are trying to take the mask off of people because they're robots and they're like, well, this is a mask, I'm a robot underneath, and everything about what they know is masks. Like, take his mask off, that's their programming. So they're trying to rip his, and the way they like pull the skull out a bit, that's messed up. But the mask.
Well, see, isn't that crazy?
Because like that,
I thought they were trying to turn them into jack-o'-lanterns or something.
A warlock robot powered by the magic of Stonehenge pulls off a mask like that. Sure.
Yeah.
Stop asking stupid questions, Shaun.
Exactly.
Yeah, I thought that was a really cool way of we just break part of the nose. I saw, maybe that's another way of killing someone by sort of ripping that part. Anyway.
Yeah, take him to the hospital where there'll be no one there to work on him.
All the doctors and nurses are at court because they've got to work through some sexual harassment stuff.
Yeah, they're hiding from the doctor.
Yeah. Tom Atkins is on the way back. We better fucking go, ladies.
And maybe that's the reason why there's no lady robots. It's like kind of lady robots. Tom Atkins will fuck it.
We can't fucking risk it.
But how good was it? How
good is coming back here? All my fucking robots are gonna get molested. Fuck that guy.
That's why they tie him up when he's in the factory. It's not because they think
Yeah.
he's going to stop the plan. It's because he's going to go around fucking everyone.
Yeah, it's just like, no, he is gonna fuck everything.
Just put the mask on because even his mouth is too much. Just get the mask on, tie him up, leave him in a room by himself.
Maybe
Yeah.
there really was a female witch and she just wasn't there because Tom Atkins was there.
Yes.
That's
It
right.
was
Yeah,
full of
maybe.
witches
Connell
until they
Cochran
found
was
out
like,
he was there.
Stay home today. Honestly, this fucking guy is driving up here. You don't want to be here. Get back
Bring
to
in
the
the
show.
warlock.
How good was the misfire? Because that was something I didn't really expect the first time I saw it as well. I was like, oh, she's going to clue onto something, but the robots are going to come in and kill her. No, it's a misfire. She's going to play with it. And it's going to
Yeah,
her in the head.
that's a
Yeah.
brutal. Marge's death is brutal in a way that I don't think we'd really seen that, like, balls out, full lighting. Here it is in a Halloween film before. Like we talked about, like the first one, there's no blood and there's not many deaths, and the deaths are all in shadow. The second one gets a bit more violent, but even the nurse who gets boiled alive, like it's a moment that you see some skin peeling off and then she's dead. But Marge is like, her friggin' face is peeling off and her eyes are bulging out. And in
Pretty
the
gnarly, yeah.
novelization, when they put her in the ambulance, they like go into a bit more detail, and she's still alive in the novelization. I don't know if she's meant to be still alive in the film.
They say she is, but she's
but
like
the
completely
idea
under
that
a sheet.
she's still alive is
Mm.
horrifying.
Yeah, that is an awful idea.
That's just if that's what happens to you, just die. Don't hang around. That's gross.
Worse.
And the kid, like they flat out kill a kid in this
Mhm.
one in one of the most horrific ways ever, and the parents have to watch.
I
That's,
know,
like,
right?
every time like up until like the scene before, I kind of forget that that's going to happen. And then as they're like walking around the factory, I'm like, oh, that kid's going to get fucked up. And then you
Yeah.
kind of watch the mums react. Those actors do a great job. Like the mum kind of watching, you can see she's like, my brain can't comprehend this. I'm like,
Yeah,
a snake just
grotesquely
crawled out of
tacky
your
family.
dead kid's mouth. How could you deal with it? Like, wow.
Yeah, actually, that was one of my little like what the hell moments was when they're showing the kid or they're showing the family around the factory, and he's like, "Oh, can I have one? Oh, yeah," and he goes, "Oh, I'll give you a mask." And I'm like, "Hang on, your dad's buying thousands of these masks for a shop. How is he not giving his kid one anyway? Like,
I
like
know.
as if it was like they're $100 each or something." It's like, you're a multimillionaire costume seller, and you can't even give your kid one of these masks. That just that didn't ring true to me at all. That's like just like. Come on, that's...
And not only that, if that was my kid, if I was being taken on a business tour through a factory where I was like probably dealing with like a multi-million-dollar business deal, and my kid is like pulling at the pant trousers of the owner saying, I want one, mate. If that was me, the only time my fucking mum would stop hitting me would be to change hands. Like there's absolutely like absolutely no chance. Like what a
So he deserved it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, 100%. Like 100%. That's why I don't have kids, because I can't run the risk of them growing up to be like that little bastard.
What do you think about like even the implication if the plan doesn't get followed by Tom Atkins? Like you think about the other Halloween movies, you know, okay, there might be the odd dog killed or something like that, but generally it's kids that are mucking up, drinking, having sex before marriage, all that sort of stuff, and you kind of go, oh well, that's what it is, and kids are very sort of untouched. And then this movie's like, oh no, we're going to kill all the kids.
Yeah,
that's pretty big.
Yeah,
and
it's a big idea.
And the thing is, they do. Like he doesn't stop it. The third channel doesn't cut the commercial, so it happens. Like you see, as soon as when the kids are watching, as soon as it goes off air, they just change the channel. So the majority of kids are still going to see this happen, are still going to die. And people talk a lot about with John Carpenter about the Apocalypse trilogy, the one they did with The Thing and The Mouth of Madness and Prince of Darkness being like the three, you know, the world is fucked movies that he made. And they're really depressing. I think this one is like way worse because it actually definitely happens, and it is definitely the most messed up thing you can think of. God damn, Tom Atkins' acting is good at that last scene though. He's good in the whole movie.
Oh my god, yeah.
But when he's just like, oh, stop it, please stop. Like that's harrowing. I was watching,
yeah,
like,
it's pretty intense. But also, is it just me, or is it's a pretty rubbish plan? Like it's a pretty rubbish plan, right?
Well, I mean, isn't that whole idea of don't they need sacrifices? Isn't that what Connell's in the brief explanation he gives?
But like you're gonna try and take over, like you're gonna try and take over the world by killing some kids. Like it's gonna, like, you know, like it's not gonna take a genius to walk in and be like, what happened to this guy? Oh, this kid's exactly like the other 69,000 that we've seen. Their face fucking melted when we're wearing a mask. Maybe we should go speak to the guys that make these fucking masks. And then that's it, like game over. Like that's it, like your plan's done. Like it's not only that, not every kid in America has a mask. That's the first thing. Not every kid was watching the TV show at the same time. So he's only killed some of the kids that bought the masks. Like it's a pretty thin plan. Ultimately,
so what you're saying is,
Sean,
Shaun, you want more children to die. Is that what you're pitching? Not enough kid death in Halloween 3.
I think we should talk about this off air.
But let's be real though. You're right. That like I can imagine my parents not being able to afford the silver shamrock mask. So I wouldn't have had one.
You'd have to rip off one from like Big W.
But I can imagine.
Exactly
I can imagine it's still going to do a lot of damage across the United States. But here's the other little funny sort of, I guess, tidbit. It's the 31st of October, and they've still got a warehouse full of these masks that haven't even shipped out. So who's getting these masks?
Sales have been fucked.
Well,
Like
they've
this
obviously
fat
sold a
bastard
few,
from
but
Idaho is like the number one salesman in America. It's like, I moved 200 units. It's like, this plan is fucking falling apart.
Yeah.
Why did we put a
fucking told me it
$90
was
price
gonna be-
point on these things? We should have made them $4.99. We just need to fucking get them in the house. Someone forgot in the accountant department that they're witches and not running a legitimate business. And he's like, the markup of this is going to be great, guys.
Yeah.
And they don't have to pay any of their staff. They can just make these things as cheap as they fucking want. They've got zero overheads.
Yeah.
All of their energy
And in
bills
that
are covered by Stonehenge.
In that regard, the film, that sort of pessimistic ending that the film has, harkens back a lot to things like the Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
The Twilight Zone, the original 50s Twilight Zone. You go back and watch it. I mean, you go back and watch it. It's still a phenomenal show.
Oh my
like,
God.
there's no reason why we shouldn't be on reruns just now. Forget the Jordan Peele one. But they not tended to, but more often than you might frequently imagine, they ended with a pretty somber note. Like, that person that's acting crazy and everybody stays away from them, and you think that they're kidnapping somebody because they think the world's going to end and they're losing their mind, only for you to find out at the end they weren't insane. It was actually true. The world's coming to an end, and they were the only person that had the sanity to try and, like, there was moments like that peppered all the way through the Twilight Zone, which then again, it would inform Halloween as a series the way it was originally intended. Like, what we're dealing with is big budget Twilight Zone episodes.
Yeah, it's
that's exciting.
Morality
that's
tale.
exciting. Yeah, exactly.
It wants you to consider like rampant consumerism, and wants you to consider what happens when you prioritize, novelties and jokes and stupidity over common sense.
I think there's better examples of it. Like Dawn of the Dead, Romero's Dawn of the Dead is a much more clear-cut, thematically crystalline version of the same story. Like, look all these zombies attacking a shopping mall. Like, this is what consumerism does to you. Like, it's very clear-cut, but there's certainly the seeds of something great in Halloween 3, for sure.
Yeah,
well, like not just the consumerism, but like you said, the technology of TV, and just the idea of being able to manipulate the minds of people through television and
the kids just sitting
radio waves,
TV, just blank and dead-eyed is.
There's a lot of good in this film. There's a lot of good in this film. It just needed like maybe a second or third draft of the script.
We're just about coming to the end of the current cycle of Halloween films. We're about to get Halloween Ends, and then theoretically it's over for real this time. They're never going to make another one again until the next time.
Year.
Until they bring out Season of the Witch Part 2,
where all the kids get their faces eaten off.
So with that in mind, allow me to pitch something to you. I have an idea for where we're going to go after Halloween Ends, right? And it spirals back to the one thing in this movie I wish was different, which is that Halloween is a movie in this universe instead of just like not mentioned at all. And one day you could possibly have Chalice back if you wanted. Here's my pitch for the next Halloween movie after Halloween Ends, right? You start with a guy walking down the street. You don't see his face. He's just in a bit of a hurry to get somewhere. We follow him as he goes to shops, gets some coffee, minds his own business. He's getting across the street. He gets to a house. He knocks on the door. Lets himself in. As he walks in, he hears a woman say, "Oh, come on in, son." And the camera spins around, and it's Josh Hartnett, it's John Tate, and then the camera pans back around, and it's Kerry Tate, aka Laurie Strode. And she's like, "Oh, I'm so glad you're here, darling." And they hug, and they're talking, and then there's a horrendous fucking noise outside of the house. They run it to see what it is, and it's some sort of a goddamn portal has opened in their backyard, and through the portal walks this haggard, devastated looking man who has seen every kind of shit, and he says, I need your help, and the camera pans up, and it's Dr. Chalice, played by Tom Atkins, and they say, who the hell are you? And then behind him through the portal walks someone else who stands next to him.
I shot him 6 times.
No, better than that. Better than that. It's Jamie Lloyd. She walks through. Danielle Harris comes through and she says, we really need your help. And then Jamie Lee Curtis playing Kerry Tate, aka Laurie Strode, says, oh my God, I don't believe it. And Josh Hartnett said, who is it? And then Laurie Strode from Halloween 2018 walks through and says, she's your sister. We need your help. Bam. And the music goes.
You've actually put some thought into it, haven't you?
The plot of this movie is that using the magic of Stonehenge after the world gets destroyed because of what happens in Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, Dr. Chalice is driven near mad by the death of his children and everyone else. He goes back to the warehouse, which is now free to use because they're all dead. He figures out how to harness the power of Stonehenge to open up a portal. He's a doctor. He could do it. He's very smart. And he travels to every dimension.
He's a doctor, man. He's not a physicist.
When he's not having sex with everyone.
Every dimension, in every multiverse, every other dimension has never had to deal with anything like this. There's never been a Conal Cochran or a Silver Shamrock in any of the other dimensions he's traveled to. But on Halloween, every other dimension he travels to, the closest thing he can find to a tragedy is this horrific case involving a masked serial killer called Michael Myers. And the only people who can defeat him are a woman called Laurie Strode and her family. So he reunites them from every dimension to come back into his dimension so that he can try and figure out how to save people, because he's learnt that the coven of witches that Conal Cochran belonged to, yes, there are witches, are planning to travel to other dimensions as well to carry out their plan. They get to one dimension and everything is fucked up and backwards, and everyone is terrified of this horrible masked serial killer called The Shape. But when they unmask them, their name is Laurie Strode, and the only person to defeat them is a very innocent man called Michael Myers. And you get good fucking Michael, you get Jamie Lloyd, you get John Tate, Kerry Tate, you get Dr. Chalice, you get Laurie Strode, and you band together and you have Halloween 3 Season of the Witch Part 2 Infinity War, and they go and fuck up everything. That movie would make $100 billion on opening weekend. You have Halloween is the only franchise in the history of horror movies that has the real world possibility of a multiverse. They are wasting the opportunity. The work is done. The general public knows the word multiverse. You don't even need to sell them on it. You just be like, Michael Myers multiverse. You have good Michael Myers. You have evil Laurie Strode. Let's go. Jason Blum, call me. $100 million. Let's do this.
Angus,
You look dumbstruck.
can I just say that is the most insane fucking idea. I mean, that is the kind of thing that I expect to see scrawled in a toilet block and like carved into the walls. Like
It is. That's why his background's blurred. It's behind him.
It is. I am in a public
genius.
toilet right now.
So what you're saying is it's kind of like Phantasm meets Sliders set in the Halloween universe.
Yep. Yeah, essentially.
It's fucking genius.
And
It's
Dr.
fucking
Chalice
genius, Angus.
has got to stay one step ahead of the Silver Shamrock coven of witches who are trying to kill everyone across every dimension because they're fucking insane.
Why don't they
You've already
just put,
got
a,
magic.
just put a pumpkin mask on Michael Myers, play that stupid jingle, and then he's dead?
No, because you get good Michael Myers into this one. Evil Michael Myers is dead. Halloween 40, Laurie Strode presumably is going to kill him in the third one. So you bring back
You gotta
all
write
of
the
her
treatment.
kids from every timeline. You bring her back from every timeline with different versions of herself. It's going to rock. It's going to be
Right, the
great.
treatment.
He probably
gonna make
has.
I've written notes in my phone. Does that count?
Yeah. Good enough.
Does that count as a treatment?
Send it to me.
It's done. I'll send it to you. You send it to your people. My people will talk to your people, and we're going to make
Excellent.
Halloween 3 Season of the Witch Part 2.
That's even the title's mental. Like,
Yeah, I mean, look, if you've got to out mental, this movie is about Stonehenge, warlocks, robots, killer masks, bugs crawling out of mouths.
yeah.
Oh, we haven't even mentioned the fact that at the end of the movie, the female lead is a fucking robot as well.
Yeah.
So
Well, yeah. I'm
Was
glad
she
you brought that
always
up.
a robot?
they
Nah, see,
never
I don't-
explain. Is she was a robot, or they just make a robot of her to kill him later on?
No, I don't think she could have been, because she helped him with the plan to foil it, and they sort of had pretty much foiled it to a point. I don't think they would have planted a robot to help out.
No,
So
I think
when
they
does the
turned her
switch
into one.
happen?
I was going to
When
say
does
they
the
either
switch
turned her
happen?
into it, but that you know,
'Cause she helps
that's what
him
I-
kill Cochrane.
But doesn't she get like
Yes.
kidnapped and she's put in a room?
She
But then
is.
she
but then-
helps him kill Cochrane.
Yeah, but Michelle's
Double-
right. That
double
is the point where you think, oh, this is where the switch has changed. She's been in that room for so long. They kept her alive for a reason because they know he's going to come back for her. So it makes perfect sense. But she helps him, kill Cochrane and foil the plan like I said, to a point. So it makes no sense that she becomes a robot after the fact.
Oh, also when
It's
Cochrane
almost
dies,
as
you
it's
don't see
almost
him
as dumb
die.
as it's
He just
almost
like
as
the energy of Stonehenge makes him evaporate. So presumably it just sent him into one of the other multiverses, and that's
It
why
just-
Dr. Charles is hunting him down.
that was the
It all,
point.
it all adds up.
It kind of made me feel like it was a bit dumb, like when Elizabeth Hurley becomes a fembot at the start of this Austin Powers 2 Despise Shaving. It's like, oh, you're riding around.
Great plot twist in cinema history, by the way.
Yeah,
Amazing.
yeah. But you know what I'm saying.
You could add it into my version of the movie too. That when they get back to Chelsea's dimension, he's
The Austin
rebuilt
Powers is a
the
thing?
robot.
Yeah, Michael Myers.
Yeah, Mike Myers is playing Michael
Yeah,
Myers.
Mike Myers is playing Michael. Hey, all things are possible in the multiverse,
Trademark.
man.
Mhm.
Anything can happen.
Amazing.
It's we've had this fucking Freddy versus Jason. You could literally have Michael versus everyone. Michael versus Abraham Lincoln. Who gives a shit? Like the multiverse is open. Let's do it. Let's get nuts.
Didn't we have an Abraham Lincoln Vampire Slayer movie as well?
Hunter. Yeah.
Yeah.
Abraham Lincoln vampire.
So it can
Hunter.
happen. Just before we sort of close out on this one, did you also think Tommy Atkins, he liked to root around, right? But the same thing is like, how did this chick fall in love with him in like a couple of days and we'll just all of a sudden,
Was
like
it even
just,
a couple of days?
I think so.
a
Well,
day.
they give you timestamps
And
for
she
the
was
days.
grieving, so maybe she's just got emotional trauma.
Yeah, no, it just felt weird. Like it did feel like there was definitely an age gap there, and it was like, why
Guys,
all of a sudden it was just like
it's
she
the
goes into a
mustache.
bar, she finds him at the bar because every other person he's sexually abused told her to go to that bar.
They've all left. He's just drinking alone.
But
It's like, don't
The
fucking
Yeah, it
Top
was
Gun
just-
Maverick mustache.
again, that was the one thing that when I remember the first time I saw it, it didn't feel necessarily right or didn't seem normal. Not
Completely perfunctory as well.
yeah.
Yeah. But 1982 Tom Atkins was a fucking he's in good shape. He's a sexy dude. He's got a
I'm not
drink.
arguing that.
Yeah.
It just
He's every.
it just seemed a bit.
How great is the scene where he's like on the phone to his wife and he's like, "Yeah, look, I can't. I got to go to this meeting.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can't pick up the kids." And it's like him and the daughter have decided they're
Yeah.
going to find out what this mystery is. And then he hangs up the phone and he's got a 6-pack of beer he's taking with him. He's clearly an
Yeah.
alcoholic. And he's like, "I'm going to need
Yeah.
a sixer for this fucking road trip.
He's,
You drive. I'm going
he's
to
an
get loaded."
alcoholic, womanizing.
Just
He's an
fucking drunk
alcoholic,
the whole movie.
womanizing, divorcee doctor. What a legend.
Yeah, don't they say at one point, like when he comes home to see his ex-wife, she's like drinking and doctoring, great mix. Like he's clearly
Yeah.
just always on the fucking grog. What a champion. Maybe that's the twist. Maybe he built the robots because he accidentally killed her dad because he was drunk and he was like, robots did it, and then they burnt themselves up.
This is getting out of hand.
I don't think it ever started in hand with this
No.
movie. It's insane. Is there anything else to say about this movie? Is there anything else to wow at and to shake our heads at?
I think
the
we've
most
been
important
talking almost as
takeaway
long
is-
as the film is actually running time.
I think the important thing to take away is that this film deserves better. Like people,
Yeah.
I don't think Michael Myers isn't in it is a good enough reason to shit on Halloween 3 anymore, because I think as we've all learned, pretty fucking
And
solid.
look,
horror.
to be honest, I feel like it's a movie that has gained a lot of cult following in the last few years, and similar. We're talking about it, but I think it's definitely getting more positive reaction now that through the passage of time and people having hindsight and going, okay, let's just watch it as the standalone film that it's intended to be. Oh, I can enjoy that movie, and I enjoyed it a lot more than the first time I saw it because I wasn't expecting. I wasn't worrying about Michael Myers or Laurie or Dr. Loomis coming on set and being involved. It was just like it was its own thing.
Yeah, it's
agree.
incredible. I'll be interested to see, like, when we talk about all the sequels as we're trying to get through and we do some final rankings. I'm interested to see where this sits for everyone, because I think it's probably going to be a bit higher than everyone initially anticipated when they look at the box sets and they're like, ugh, that one. Now it's a sneaky little beast. Like, do we need to rate it? Do we need to give it any?
I think we can rate it, but I would argue that yes, it is a sequel somewhat, or it's part of the franchise, but you can't really put it against the Michael Myers films because it's not the same thing. It really isn't. It's like it's in name only, and I don't even think it's probably fair to rate it against the original Halloween. If that's the bar that we normally set on this podcast, how can you? How can you? It's an anthology film. It's gone with a title. They obviously were trying something different, and it didn't work at the time. But it's not Halloween. It's Season of the Witch, and
Yeah.
I don't think you can. It's comparing apples and oranges. I think.
No, it's comparing witches and masked men with knives.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I give it a pretty solid 4 jack-o'-lanterns out of 5. I really like it a lot now, a hell of a lot more than I ever thought I would. Yeah, it's like I love 80s horror movies. That's like my favorite things to watch, and this is dripping with everything you want in 80s horror. You can almost reach out and touch the nostalgia and the lighting and the gore and the sweat and the joy of an 80s horror. So it really tickles me. I think definitely 4 out of. What about you, Cable?
I'd probably almost go 4 as well, but I'd say 4 silver shamrocks, to be honest. Because it's the same thing. It gave me everything you sort of want from an 80s film, but just like the little bits and pieces that I feel like even the motel they go to, it's not the same, but it made me feel a little bit about Psycho, Bates Motel, and he goes in, he checks the book and checks for the name, just little nods to, and then like we said, kind of had that feel of the Invasion of the Body Snatchers. You go, hang on, these come to the weird town. They're the outsiders. It's very isolating. What's going on in this town? There's cameras following. It's a bit ahead of its time, I think, a little bit too, with using that sort of technology and stuff and the infrared, and I don't know. I just thought it was really cool, and able to see it. I watched it in 4K the other night. And, I really enjoyed it.
Shaun, you look horrified at those ratings.
Yeah.
What would you rate it?
Not horrified as such, but it's certainly much higher than I thought you guys were going to give it. I'd give it 3. I think it's a pretty solid 3, and I think it's because, like I said before, there's a lot of good elements in it. There's a lot of good stories. There's a lot of good thematics. All those individual things are great, but I just don't feel it to coalesce together into a narrative that one makes much sense. Like the fact that you had, the fact that just by definition, the fact that you had to look up, what the plan, that's a problem. That's a problem in a film. If you don't know what the plan is,
it should really be explained.
It should really be explained, right? And all those different elements, the robots. It's a great idea. Take the robots and then you use the Invasion of the Body Snatchers idea. That's great. Or are we talking about something to do with Stonehenge and witches? Because that in and of itself, that's a great idea in and of itself. Or are we talking about the suggestive power of TV and how that infects small town America, whatever the case may be, with the advertising and consumerism and all that kind of stuff. That's a good idea in and of itself. I just don't think all those elements necessarily coalesce into a great narrative in and of itself. But there is at least the beginnings of all those great things. And for that, and not being a direct, another continuation, another ripoff of the original Halloween, that you kind of have to tip your hat to it. It's that 3 stars is more bravery. I'm tipping my hat to the bravery. It takes Sandman. If you've got a winning franchise and you want a dogleg away from it, that takes nuts. So I tip my hat to the bravery, and I tip my hat to the beginnings of great things. But I just don't think it gets all the way there. But it is still better than I remember it.
Michelle, how many jack-o'-lantern shamrocks are you going to give it?
I think I'd give it a 3.5. And I haven't seen any of those movies you guys referenced, but it gave me definite Stranger Things vibes, which made me happy. Yeah. And even Killer Clowns from Outer Space kind of vibes.
Yep.
Yeah. So
yeah,
I enjoyed it. One I've actually seen.
I'm actually a little bit fucking impressed that you've seen Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
I'm genuinely stunned that you
I'm pretty sure the only reason she's seen it, Glenn Powell must have said it was one of his favorite movies.
Not true. I paid for it and everything to watch it.
Glenn Powell must have said it.
Goodness.
That's one of my friend's favorite movies.
Incredible.
Yeah, before we go, just to, we're talking about our ratings, and we don't really normally refer to IMDb or Rotten Tomatoes, but Rotten Tomatoes, that's really not great.
Shaun refers to it if he's trying to fight you on if a movie's better than another movie.
47% and audience score 28% on Rotten Tomatoes, and the audience score or the votes on IMDb is 5.1, and the critics is about 50%. So yeah, definitely not high on this movie. But again, I wonder if that's still biased, people coming in from Halloween 1 and 2 and then expecting something and getting something. So
I also wouldn't be surprised if there are
100%.
people who are voting crappy scores on it who haven't seen it. It's like, oh, that one isn't even Michael. That's shit. 2
This-
stars.
They're still
Yeah.
releasing merch and stuff for it though. Like you see the 3 set of like with the masks and the kids and that
Yeah.
stuff's still coming
Yeah.
out. So
The pressing of the score, the vinyl pressing of the score, like came out last year. Like there is still some really like good stuff going. It also has like some of the best opportunity for merch out of any of the Halloween films. Like Michael Myers
Yeah.
has the mask and a boiler suit, and that's kind of it. Whereas this one's like, hey, do you want like some weird witch shit or robots or 3 totally
3
different but
masks?
very cool masks? Like, what do you want? Do you want just like just a recording of Dr. Charles being sleazy? What do you want? We got it all. It's great.
the 10-hour video of that Silver Shamrock song that just keeps
Dun,
playing.
dun, 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 dun. My days to Halloween. This is great. Everything about it's great. I love it.
There's the outro.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, thanks for joining us on our journey with Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. And remember, stop it, please stop it. Not all sequels suck.